Okay, so I've got a lovely pheasant this week, and I thought, actually, do you know, we've done so many different things, but we've actually not done any artwork of pheasants, and they're so gorgeous. You know, actually, the females and the males are really beautifully marked, aren't they? So I thought, let's have a go at that today. Apart from the fact, it's they are out and about quite a bit at the moment, aren't they? And I think this particular picture is typically this time of the year because you've got all like the forget-me-nots out and everything, and which is they're all out at the moment, aren't they? May is a great month for that, so I thought it's quite current, so that's nice. Um, so there we go. So I'm going to work in this in um, pastels and pastel pencils. Because mine is quite a small sheet, I'll have to kind of go a bit smaller. So I am going to have to go more pencil than pastel. I'll put some bits in pastel, but it's going to start to get quite difficult to manipulate them. So you can get into all with all sorts of pencils actually, really get into the detail here. And then obviously the more detail you want to put in with acrylics, just pop that in with a nice small, go smaller as you build up the layers. So really drawing it out. One of the things people find quite tricky with pheasants is that the tail is getting the right kind of length on the tail. So I'm just going to just split this into a grid actually. That will really help. But you don't have to do this, by the way. I'm just doing it because when you've got this little grid here, you can see that this part of the bird, how much of it comes in and how far down it is. Makes it much easier than trying to kind of work it out um, where everything goes. So obviously we can see that pretty much the whole tail part is in here, this half. Now you can do the same on your sheet and then rub the lines out if you want to, or you can just kind of work out whereabouts. I mean, I'm just kind of looking here and thinking, right, so most of it, if I even put like a little middle mark there, I know like that's the centre mark, I think I'll pop that in. And then I know that'll help me a little bit. I don't have to draw the grid on, but I can see that quarter and that one and that one and that one. So yeah. So really what we're doing is looking at how far up this body of the bird comes on our piece of paper. Whatever size it is, we can scale this up because this is like well, it's just really tiny, but it's an A size, so it will scale up really big as well. So what we want to do is kind of look at how far up within this section it comes up. It starts. And then the top of the body, we're kind of making some guesswork. That's kind of halfway in this quarter, and it's just a bit below that. So we can look at that. I think okay, it comes to about up to about here. So I'm just looking at the sections of the bird, the height of the highest part of the back, and then again, I'm looking at really how far over this where the neck joins here is now. If I like look at that on my bit of paper, it's just almost halfway across this quarter. So where it goes down again, I'm going to pop that there. So we've got quite a good start then. So all we need to do there is kind of follow the shape of this back across really. That starts to give us the shape of the back. And then, as I said, we can scale that up or down. I'm just working if you're working in pastel pencil, go for just one tone lighter than your paper. Obviously mine's really dark so you can see it on the screen, but if I was doing this on my own, I'd just choose a slightly different colour. And then obviously we're looking at this at how the head goes up, and it doesn't come that far up, does it, into this part of the half here. So I'm just kind of following the neck up, and then there's the feathers of the ears. They're not ears, but they're the feathers whereabouts we should think they look like ears, don't they? And then obviously like looking just at the top of where the head would come. And then we can like again, where we're looking at this part here of this quarter, we can see that all of the head kind of fits in there. So I could kind of separate this up again like into another little section there so we can see where that comes to. So what I'm looking at is trying to make sure that the head comes out. We pop the beak in. So we're just following this line round, aren't we, really? And then we can look at things like, if we're not sure about the width, we can have a little look about where this section is of the face here, which is really beautifully coloured, isn't it? And then again, what we're looking at is the curve of this body, the body here. So it kind of, what it actually does is it kind of slants that way a little bit. So have a little look at that. So it slants that way and then comes round, and then there's quite an angle on this part of the body. So it does, that's the bit that people can struggle with quite often. So if you just kind of look across and try and work out like what the slant is before it starts to turn and come down underneath here. And then again, how it comes in and then it comes further down. Now I'm going to leave that rest of that bit for the moment because I'm going to work with the feathers, and that will help give this body some shape as well. Just really wanted to get some of the shape of that in. And we'll probably, adjust this as we go, really. So, so once we've got the back of this body in here, then obviously what we're looking at is getting the tail out and following the tail. Obviously, the tail comes out quite a long way, just above this mark, doesn't it? Here, it kind of comes up in the air, and we're just observing the shapes, really. But as I said, don't worry if you haven't got it perfectly, because we can adjust it as we're going. And then it comes back through up to kind of this middle line here. Gets a bit wider at that point, doesn't it? And then we can just see this into this section here. We've got a little bit of this tail feather and then a little bit more. So the reason I've left this area here is I would like to kind of get some of the wing in here, because it's what's really great is we get a lot of sections with pheasants with the feathers, so it makes it much easier to kind of plan it out. So if we look at the section of these, where the wing starts here and moves round, we can see it actually just follows all the way, and then just starts to kind of curl round, and that wing comes down a little bit there. And what we've got at the top, we've got some of these lovely brown wing feathers here, but then we've got the other one, it starts to overlap here. So once you've got some of the drawing of the colours in here, so I've got the white area and the blue, we want to make sure we've got those different sections in here so that we don't start the wing too far up. We need to allow for this lovely pattern around the feathers, these bright feathers here. And then we can see where this wing goes, and then we can see the other section here of this wing. And that comes down like this. So what we're doing is we're just kind of sectioning out that, aren't we? So I'm taking that to there. And then I can see I've not left this, obviously this shape needs to really come out now a little bit at the front. So then we've got the rest of this wing underneath. So we've got the top of the wing here, it's brown, and the orangey part. And then we've got this wing comes down, but then, so it comes down, if again, you're just checking angles like that, just hold it on the top bit of the wing. Make sure it's kind of following the right shape round, but then it comes out again underneath quite straight. So that's really interesting, like that. And then I can see there now I need to move that bit up. So this is what we're doing. We're just adjusting it all the time to get from one section to another, which is really helpful. And again, here we can go around, so following this wing down, now we can see that this wing, there's a gap here where there's a bit of, there's some shadow here where this comes down a bit more, where they get these shadows in here. And then we can just see the bottom of this wing, but we can't kind of see it in the grass very far. So then what we can see is we can have a little look at how that kind of comes down. So if we follow this down, it almost looks quite straight. I'm just going to rub off that bit there so we can see it. So it almost comes straight down like this a little bit underneath at the side. And then it comes in. So we're just following these patterns, and then the other side of it's really dark, so then we can get that in as well. So I'm just following that wing down. And then we can see, like, we can adjust this little bit here. So we can see the body as well at the bottom. It's all in the shadow where it's very dark, and that helps us as well. So now I can see there, that's where the body needed to come out to a little bit. Need to just go up a little bit further. There we go, that's better. So it is a bit of a work in progress when you're doing this, because actually of all the birds, they can have some quite unusual stances, and they're quite difficult to get the bit of the neck that comes out. Apart from sometimes when you're getting them standing proud and they're stretching the neck, that disappears. But yeah, it is a little bit unusual with that section. But that's why we're just kind of, if we use the wings to help us, we can get a better shape on it really, because then you know you've got your wings and everything in. And that's it. And then obviously we can see the feet are going to go here, but we can't quite see the feet. So they're just all in shadow on this particular one. And that's that. And a lot of it's hidden by the grasses and things like that. So, so really, yeah, I've just kind of got the sections in. I'm not going to put any patterns on for the moment. Now, if you're working in watercolor pencils or pencils, then you can start to put these patterns on if you want to, especially where the light ones are. So you know that you're not going to pop, you're not going to put anything in that light area with the, you want to put the light ones in rather than put the dark ones in. And we can do that there. And in terms of all of the foliage, well, in pastel and acrylic, what I would say is put those on afterwards. You can kind of prep your paper green before if you want to, like a mid-tone green, just around the bird. But I just kind of take the colour up to more or less, just even you can even take it just inside the bird. I've just gone for a green pastel paper and I'm going to use that. So I'm only going to add certain colours to this paper. I'm not going to put that many things onto it. I'm just going to put some shadow near the end. But again, watercolor, you can bring a little bit of a watercolor pencil. You can just kind of shade it and then and bring it right up. And it's so you can be so careful between the to bring it into the right area that you don't really need to kind of prep anything before or anything like that. Okay, so it's thinking a lot of this really is just thinking about all the different tones in the bird. And as I said, if you're working in pencil, watercolor pencil, watercolor, you can start to work in the lightest areas and get those in, and then just go into your darker areas and darker areas. Now, but what we would be doing with pastel, not necessarily in acrylic, because what we can do with acrylic is put a base coat on in like a mid-tone base coat and then put the shadow in, but then go into the lights last. But with pastel, I'm going to get some of these shadows in first, just so that I know that they're in and they're fixed. I'm literally just going to go in and shade those in now. But you can just have a start getting the colours that you want in there. Use a blending stick as well with these if you want to, with the pastels. That's easier. I have mine. So you can obviously use the rubber ones, or you can use the. I've got my bit of paper there. I've got that. You can use the rubber blending tools, or you can use the paper ones, and that's like quite helpful to kind of getting the nice lines in. where you need them to go. And, you know, getting into those little gaps if you can't quite, if it's a bit difficult to do it. But yeah, so I'm just going to go and pop all of those darkest tones in. I can see them around the bird, but some of them we can't put in until last because the pattern is on the top. So, you know, it's one of those things where you've just got to make an adjustment. Going in with shadow in here. And it always looks really odd when you remember, we've got to remember that as we're building this up, it will start to feel much better as we get nearer to the end of it. So it's just that, you know, don't worry if it's not working out. It's just a process and we've just got to be really patient with it. I'm having trouble with this sharpening this particular pencil. It's normally fine. So, you know, I've got this bit of paper, obviously, just to get some testing in there, you know, deciding what colour do you want your darkest value to be. 'Cause it is quite dark in this shadow area, isn't it? So you might want to, you know, make some areas even darker. It's up to you to, you know, decide which is your darkest value. And getting little layers in. But yeah, and again, I was saying this morning. There's no particular set way of working on it. You just kind of work on the areas that you're most attracted to. Some people start on the head, and other people will, you know, start on a wing or something. I think one of the biggest things to think about really as we're working through it is the patterns on it. Like obviously the final patterns as we're getting darker on the top or whatever. Is we're following each of those wings will have a pattern that you follow and often they're directional. So it's those little details we need to just check in on. But don't feel overwhelmed by it. They do have a lot of pattern. However, once we're starting to do it, um, you know, we'll just get more and more aware of what those patterns are. So it's just best to start in one place and build it up. I'm still just working my way through these darks. Yeah, a lot of the time it does look really stark. The contrast, but then as we build it up, the contrast doesn't feel quite so bad. Okay, so just keep continuing in, as I said, depends on what material you're working in. I'm just going to pop in a couple of darks between there. The reason for, is we get these sealed in nicely with the pastels, and then we're not kind of muddying it, because the biggest problem when we're using pastels actually is the muddying up. Easily muddy, things up because we've put in the darks on top, and it's all getting a little bit too messy. So yeah, so again with acrylics as well, you can build in those up in pencils, getting the light ones in, but in acrylics we can build up like the mid-tones. So obviously, it's looking at what kind of a colour you want to pop in there for those mid-tones. I think one of the beauties is, you can build these colours up, but actually, the colours that you get are absolutely fantastic with the birds, with the pheasants. So don't be frightened of using colour, is what I was going to say actually. Just going to move in with a mid-tone in here. I've made my birds slightly bigger, to be fair. And I'm just going to make something mindful of my fingers. You just get so messy, don't you? And then obviously drying them off, because you don't want to make your paper all wet as well. But just observing these fabulous patterns in here. And you don't have to work through the whole bird blocking it out either. If you want to then layer up, that's absolutely fine. So, I might just go in with some slightly lighter ones. I just find that one that's a bit peachy. So I'm just going to layer up with some of the kind of lighter areas in here. Just give it a little fix into place. When we're working in the same colour palette with pastels, it doesn't matter if they smudge into one another. So, you know, we can just kind of like work the colours around. Now, this is a little bit darker here. And again, sometimes you will miss bits. It doesn't really matter as long as you're not kind of going to rub it all in together and make it really muddy. That's the main thing. We can work it over a little bit if we need to. And I would just go in with a blender or the very tip of my finger there to do that. And then again, you know, we can still work on an area if that makes, you know, if you prefer that. So I'm just going to go in and try and get some of those really white. I might actually just use an ordinary pastel for that though. Just get some of those white markings on there on the top. And how you create the markings is just down to your, you know, your handiwork really, and what feels natural to do. It might just be dots, or you might be quite, you know, really quite precise. But I'm just pressing on a bit harder and leaving quite a good imprint in here, with plenty of chalk on over the top. It's a little bit warmer in here. I've missed out, so I'm just going to add a bit of this warmth. Where I do have to be a bit careful not to make a muddy mess. I'm just going to carefully blend a bit. And then, you know, each of these sections starts will start to take shape. So I can even go back in and, you know, pop in if there's any darker ones on there, pop those on. And you get a bit of the mottling, don't you? See the contrast of the lights and the darks, that sometimes shows up better. Yeah, we're just looking at the tones all the time. What can we see? What do we want to pop in? Are there any kind of, you know, and we're just switching about. So with the coloured pencils or watercolor pencils, you might not have, same as pastel, you may not have that an exact mix where you can layer up two pencils on top of each other. But test that on a bit of paper first to see what that looks like, because you need to know, you know, that we're going to layer up the way you want them to. I'm just going to continue on with this tail here. And there's a kind of, looking at the tones in there, there's almost a bit of a warmer colour on the top, so I'm just going to take that through. And then, you know, you can start to pop on some of the shapes and everything as well. I'm going to get a contrast in there with the lighter one as well. And you'll get different effects with different pencils. So it's just getting to know, you know, the pencils that you've got really and how it works and how they work with it. Well, I'm actually going to pop in there a bit of you know, some of this lighter area as well in between. Sometimes at the top of it's catching the light a little bit on there. And sometimes just with having that contrast between those lights and darks in there, it creates even more, you know, interest. I'm going to pop in some of the shapes of this tail. You're just observing the patterns. You can wiggle it if you don't want it to be too kind kind of bring it round the shape. Some of it's quite round at this end, rounded more, and then it kind of comes over the ridge. We're just observing that, all of those bits that we can see. How far does it come down? What angle is it at? What shapes it's making? And then the base of the tail, even that, so I'll just move that off actually now. The base of the tail, and we can see some of the other shading and things that we can just add in if we've missed a bit again, because that sometimes creates the shape of the contrast between the end of the bird, the feathery bits. And we're just continuing on, really, making our observations, moving on, and trying not to get too caught up in one area, because obviously the bigger picture, there'll be things that we can change as we go through. And I'm meaning like the darkest tones are the ones often at the end we think, oh, I'll just darken that. But you don't have to do that all at the beginning, because we can add, we can make sure that that's fine. So I'm just going to take a pause before I go on to the next section, see how everyone's getting on. So yeah, so just keep working through with what, the area that you're doing, really. So what we're looking for as well is like the tones. Is it some of the tones are quite warm on this bird, aren't they? Apart from the very dark areas, but so it's deciding what kind of colours you want to pop on there. Do you want it kind of to be a bit ready? There's a lot of people see purple and all sorts on these birds, so that's the other thing to think about. You might want to actually go in with some purpley tones or something. Quite a few people were doing that last night, so it was worked out quite nice with just a little bit of a bright in there. Actually, it's a little bit different, so I'm going to go in with a purple tone in here. This is very dependent on what we can all see individually as well. So some of us see in purple. I'm working in a similar tone of kind of dark, very dark browns and purples, so that you get a bit of both in there. And then, you may even want to go in with a lighter, brighter one. Actually, I want to go in with a pinky one in there. So where you get any highlights, just have a little look at that. It's just how we see the colours, isn't it? And then again, it's just finding that right tone, the tone of brown. I can never tell in my pastel sticks. I still don't know which brown is which, because they're so unlike the colours that come out. Just don't expect that's about the nearest one that looks like it should do. But as I said, with pastels, you don't often always get the colour that's a true match. You've just got to, you can layer up some tones, or you can just have a go, which is what I'm doing, the latter, just to have a go. But it does make us use colours when we haven't got any true match. That's quite a good thing. We use colours a little bit differently if we haven't got a true match, because we have to really think about what it could be as opposed to what it is. Again, we're just kind of building in these lighter and darker colours. If you've missed any, if you've got any darks that overlay, just be careful not to kind of smudge them in too much with anything, but so just pressing that little bit harder. Make sure that, I can get a good kind of, so it's not going to just drop off. And also, we don't want to be smudging it too much. Just more layers we put on, just a nice light touch, so that we're just getting a good coverage without it becoming muddy when we do it. And then, and then as we're doing, we're on to the next kind of block of colours, finding the next kind of match that you're happy with, really, is what I'd say. So I'm just going to go in with this colour now. And, again, looking at any warmth. So if you're working in like graphite pencil or whatever, the warm ones, you just go, use the, you can use kind of a mid colour for those warmer tones. In a mid number of your range, if you've got a range, or kind of a middle pressure if you've just got one pencil with you. So this was, overlaying some of these for softness. So, we can use lots of different strokes with whether we're using pencil or pastel or, acrylic, whatever we're using. Get those nice marks in there, and those kind of make them feel like feathers, but you know, just get the different shape between them. And then again, you know, if there's any highlights in there, we're just going in with a bit more of a firm pressure. You may even see touches of other colours as well in there. You know, sometimes blue or something bright, you know, pops up as well, and it's like, oh, that's interesting. So I'm just looking actually as I'm working through where this wing is here. I'm noticing I think it needs to be a bit darker, but again, this is sometimes what we do as we're working through, like looking at the shadow under one section, we might suddenly realise it needs to be a bit darker, and then that can pick up the colour on some of the others. Sorry about the squeaking. So between, you know, this is where we get between the feathers because of the depth and everything. You know, you can always go in and make those values slightly darker if you need to. And it's just part of the observation process. We don't see everything to start with, it's impossible. We can get a good overview, but when we kind of then comparing one to the next, we think, oh yeah, that is much darker, and then that value it's a bit lighter. And that's how we work our way through, really. So keeping going, so looking at this warmer section here. And again, even in there, we get different tones. So some of that's quite warm and some of it's a bit more peachy. So I'm going to, and then some of this down here is almost a bit darker because it's going into the shadow down at the bottom of the bird. That's very warm. Okay, so it's just, we've just got to bear it in mind that these can change. Make sure that my fingers are clean as well. So as it's disappearing away around this side, we may end up with a bit of a darker one in there. And the same underneath here. So this is quite warm at the minute down there, but I'm going to go in a bit less warm. Right, and then, you know, this is where we can just work in some of these lighter areas at the top here, just getting some, following some of the patterns as well that I can see there. Just some of the areas are just slightly more highlighted. Again, I'm just kind of slimming down this bit here because it's a little bit, it's more in the shadows. Taking in a bit of the slightly darker tone in there. And again in here, slightly darker. As we're going into the kind of a shadowy area here. And then, starting to look at that there as well. So we're just working in all of these different areas that we can see all the time. Something else will just appear and you think, yeah, I've not noticed that before. It's just great. It's brilliant for observational skills, is this? And then again here, I'll start to pop in some of these. And we get these lovely, we can follow these patterns around. So interesting, aren't they? When you can get just pulled in with them. At first we think, oh, they're just ad hoc these, but they're quite consistent, the patterns, aren't they? When you look, you get these kind of rings of them that are just kind of follow around. So again, just going to kind of go in and darken some areas because I can start to see now I've got a bit more, again, as we're working through it, that some need to be a bit darker. I'm going to kind of bring that in a little bit in. And this is where I'm not going to go in and start really kind of rubbing everything, because again, it will just take off. It will definitely get quite muddy, will that, with those oranges. I'm going to try and preserve the colour. Okay. So again, just keep working up the bird, see what you can see. I'll just take a pause there and see how you're getting on. Okay, so we're just continuing working, up the bird, down the bird, across the bird, wherever you find yourself to be with it. So I'm just going to get in some of the colours in here, which are just beautiful, aren't they? Like these blues. And that's the thing, isn't it? Which one do you use? It's just trying to make your mind up which one. And some people may be able to see it a bit better. I mean, mine is a very small picture, but the bigger sometimes the picture is, the more you can see on it. So you can see the colours. I think on my big picture of it this morning, there was like, I could see a couple of navy blue and I could see a bit of a brighter blue there as well. So, put as much in as you can see and or as little in. So I'm just going to go in a little bit with a bright in there as well, like a kind of a turquoisey colour as well. So just making sure that white's nice and bright. Just very gently kind of pressing that in. Beautiful, isn't it? It's just like a, almost a bit like a collar on there. And I'm just pulling this down a little bit in the corner. So we can do this, you know, if you're kind of, because pastels will overlay it. You think, oh, I've just kind of missed a little bit of the shape out, then you can just pop that back in. And then again, you know, then we can start to kind of work in some of the other details. There's some other darks in around here, around the bill. All sorts of shapes on around the head and the beak. And then it's just deciding, isn't it? So you know what kind of red you want to go in on the bill, because there's like different tones in there. So again, you just try. I'm actually going to go in with a more of a bright, I think, like a reddy pink. Get this super shape. Yeah, getting some of these lovely shapes in there. And then obviously, you know, there are little bits like the eye, those kinds of shapes you're getting. It can be it's a bit darker in places. I've got some feathers kind of sticking out from under the beak. And then I've lost a little bit of this dark colour underneath the bill here, so I'm just going to pop that back in. And then having a little look at where the beak is, the shape of the beak. Do get the shadow in around that, so that's there. And then it's just following, almost you can follow the line of so kind of getting this eye shape from where the beak is, but you can't see it really well, so it's a little bit, it's almost a bit yellowy, isn't it? It's not really obvious. Well, not on my small picture anyway, so I'm just going to go in with kind of a muted yellowy colour. I don't want a real bright one. I'm just going to go in with a more of a muted colour, so I know it's there, but I'm just not, you know, drawing huge amounts of attention to it, because you can't really see it that well on this one. There's no kind of bright spot in the eye or anything. I will do almost kind of a little line under it. yeah, so I may just put a little, just a smaller slight like bit at the top here. And then even within there, there's a little bit of shading. I'm going to go in a little bit brown. Just in within this bill, I can see a little bit of a contrast, very small contrast, I must admit. And then there's even a very small area with that. Similarly, I can see yellow, but you know, just see what you can see. Just so you get that variation in the colour. And then the beak, of course. So again, it's picking out the colour that you want for the beaks. It's almost not, doesn't feel like it's really bright white or anything like that. I'm just going to go in with a light, and I'm just putting plenty of pressure on that, following the shape of the beak as it goes into the face as well. Yeah, so I'm just having a look at my while I'm doing it. I'm fairly happy with where that is at the moment. I haven't got any of the, obviously the grasses, I'm not going to put too many grasses in because what I'd like to be able to do is use that colour to come through. But what I'll do is looking at the background, obviously some of these lovely blue forget-me-nots and things. What I'm going to do is put in some of dark, really dark, so I'm going to use this as my mid-tone and just put in some dark contrasts with, you know, you don't even have to do this, you can, it's entirely up to you with a pencil. So I'll pop the darks in. And as I said, you know, you don't even have to do the background if you fancy leaving it. A little bit darker than that though, that's not quite dark enough for me. I'm going to go in with this dark, this one I think, let's try that. Better. So I'm just going to pop in some of these darks and see all the way around. Pop a few in here. And this is where you have to be a bit selective though, because you could go forever on this because there's so much, you know, there are lots of detail, but it's just picking out a few key bits more loose, you know, and keeping it nice and loose. Not getting too bogged down with a lot of it. I'm just going to look at some kind of general, like we've been looking at the patterns, just some general patterns of clumps of grass. And obviously as they go back, they get a bit smaller. I'm literally just going to go through and kind of pop some in. You won't be able to see much of these anyway soon, so I'll have a lot of flowers over. So it's just kind of a suggestion really that there's these grasses. Just make them a bit softer. Or you can keep them a bit straighter with a blender, but you know, a blender. I'm quite happy to make them a bit softer. Yeah, so just kind of working through really. And some of these tops I'm going to cover with, cover with these forget-me-nots anyway. The only difference is it's getting a bit, some of these clumps at the front are might be slightly longer. But you don't, you can put as few in or as, as many as you want to. Same with a brush, you can just kind of wiggle a few paint marks on there or pop a few in. But yeah, it's knowing, isn't it, how much to stop. So I'm going to stop there. More in here, but I'm just going to pop a little bit of a shadow and almost like a bit of a darker one in there underneath where the feet go, a bit darker. Where the bird is casting a shadow over the top. So let's see if I can find a really dark one there. See what that. That's one colour. Okay, that's better. So this is quite obviously it's casting a shadow over these dark areas here. And I'm just kind of going to compact, just pop a few more of these that are even darker in. Again, you don't have to put that many tones in if you've got a really dark background in there, but you can if you want to create a bit of depth between the clumps. Yeah, so it's just been selective because it really could take you just literally days to pop all those in. So it's just a little bit selective because just getting a feel for the fact that it's wandering around in this lovely forget-me-not field. That's terribly dirty now, my hands, so I'll be really careful I don't kind of when I'm starting putting these lighter ones on. So I'm going to go in for the nearest blue that I've got. And what we need as well is a bit of a contrast. So I'm going to go in with the darker one. See what that one is. I'm going with this one. So again, what we need is just patches of kind of general shapes. Otherwise, again, we're going to get so bogged down with this. You want just a general idea, and we're layering over. So it does need to just feel like a shape, but not be perfect. I'm just kind of tapping that in. And then I am going to go over with a nice light bright blue as well, for contrast. But actually you can focus in on the bird and not put any background in at all, or just very, very lightly. It's not like an absolute necessity. I think if I wasn't demonstrating this, I'm just showing you how you can do it, I probably wouldn't put the flowers in because I quite like the pheasant on its own. So don't feel that you have to do it just because I'm demonstrating it. It's sometimes like the two tones that give us the feel of the forget-me-nots anyway. Just working it in. As you go further back, you can't really see a lot anyway. We just see clumps of flowers, little flowers that are blue, and we can see like it's catching the light with some. And you see those ones are like looking quite bright under the it's actually looking white, but it's a very, very light blue. So this is what I was saying, you've got to really just go in with the nearest colour that you've got. Oh, let's try that one. Sometimes we just don't have it. That's a bit better. And so you just have to do, you just have to go in with what you've got with pastel. And we're just kind of just working through and popping patches in there like that. You know, they're all kind of different shapes, aren't they, as well? You know, some to the side. You can't get all of them. Well, you can, but you've got to allow, you know, if you want to do it in lots of detail, you want to allow, you know, more time to do that. So don't be hard on yourself because you think, oh, I can't get it all down. That's fine. Yes, we're just working our way through, really. And again, you know, you could just kind of get some little highlights, have a little look at where they are. It just catches the light, doesn't it, basically, in some of the areas here. I know I'm super rushing on this one, but um, and then you can almost as well get another, get this pencil colour. Okay, you can almost look in, actually, what's this one? That's, yeah. You can almost, you know, just kind of go through then and just get a little bit of just pop a little bit more of a shape just round some, like I'm not going round it, I'm not tracing any shapes, but I'm just kind of getting the feel that it's a flower in here because I've gone from splodges. So sometimes having a contrast between the lights and darks, especially if it's a very similar colour to your background, it won't pop, so it pops a bit better. So yeah, we're just kind of working way through there. So I'm just gonna just kind of give those a little, just gently tap them in. Create that. Yeah, and then when you soften them down slightly like that, um, you know, that kind of make that kind of sharpness off them as well. And that's it really. I wouldn't really kind of pop more than that in when we're just experimenting. Just a nice idea just to kind of get a general feel of how the grasses work and how the forget-me-nots work or whatever else you've got in there. And the same with the fence posts and things. If you're doing something with the fence posts, you can get a nice feel of how the wood goes, for example, by looking at the patterns and the tones on there as well. So yeah, so that's it really. So it's more it's just that process of observing a little bit more, finding out like how feathers and things work and which direction to go, kind of the proportion of the bird, etc., etc. And I'm just working through it. So it's lovely. It's really enjoyable, and I hope that's been helpful. And you can have a go at pheasants or other game bird as well. Thank you.